The Pokemon Company has some problems, and for the purpose of this video, I'm going to do my best to focus in on just Pokemon organized play for the TCG. And I would also like to point out before I continue with this video that the Pokemon Company also does a lot of really great things with all of their different multimedia properties. The organized play events are great to watch. They're usually pretty good about streaming. They pick some good commentators. Most of the problems that are popping up are happening behind the scenes or within the events that you're not always going to see unless you're participating in them. The first big component of these problems that I want to address is probably the obvious one, and that is that Pokemon Live is garbage. It's almost unplayable, especially coming over from a pretty reliable client with Pokemon Trading Card Game Online. It wasn't amazing. It was kind of bare minimum for what the Pokemon Company could put out, but Pokemon Live is just not ready, and players don't have a choice anymore. If you want to play Scarlet and Violet forward, then you have to use Live. One of my plans for this channel was to start doing more streaming of the TCG. This is a TCG channel. Probably be good if somebody actually got to watch me play sometime. And I'm a big fan of Standard. I'm looking forward to Standard changes with Scarlet and Violet. But game doesn't work for me. It's not available on Mac, which is the computer I use. So I had to put it on iPad. Whenever I try to play on iPad, the game absolutely crashes and closes out 1 out of 3 matches I try to enter. Also, just at bare minimum, the graphics don't look good. A lot of cards are not usable. There's a ton of glitches where the cards do not interact with one another in the way that they're supposed to. Pokemon Live, just not good. The other big component of this is live events, more specifically with judges, with the judging staff. And this is a problem that has been around for a long time. And generally, the judges at these events were susceptible to player bullying, basically, where they would side with whichever player was the loudest. More often than not, the player that went and got the judge was always going to get the ruling that they had in mind, whether or not it was correct. And every time there's a big regional event, even from a lot of just locals, I see a lot of chatter on social media of, hey, here's some really bad judging calls that were made, or here's some really bad judge behavior, which we also recently saw with, the cowboy judge making some extremely inappropriate comments to competitors. And I think the issue here is that Pokemon Organized Play is not willing to really monitor or provide any type of quality control for the individuals that they are establishing as the face of organized play. If you are a player at an event, you're not interacting with the famous PokeTubers that are commentating. The faces of Pokemon for you are the floor staff, the judging staff, the people that are actually running and monitoring the events. But there's not really a process for really figuring out what types of individuals they are. So there's different levels, of professorship within the Pokemon TCG. The very lowest level, all you have to do is pass a test, basically an online quiz. At higher levels, you do have to pass a background check, among other things, but this still doesn't filter out the basic communication skills that people probably need just as a basic requirement in order to accomplish the task of professionally judging an event and interacting with the player base. For the most part, TCG players in general, including Pokemon, are all wonderful, kind, cooperative people that don't do the types of behaviors that are problematic at events. But even when it's just a small percentage of the player base, that is just an enormous Dorito-fingered Pokemon baby man that just wants to cause an uproar every time they lose, or if they get caught cheating and they know that if they're loud enough, the judge will just ignore it and focus on whatever they're yelling about just to get the person to shut up and play again, to sit at the table and just go back to what they're supposed to be doing. When judges are susceptible to that, and not really trained on how to handle that, then you get situations where the judge is essentially bullied into making an incorrect decision. So it's not enough to just make sure that the quality of individuals at your higher level events are personally and interpersonally equipped to handle these situations. It's also making sure that when individuals within the player base are causing these types of trouble, that their pop ID is being marked, that there's some type of consequence for being a turd at an event. And I know that Pokemon doesn't want to go as far as just banning people from play, but if they want to improve the quality of in-person play, that's one of the things they're gonna have to implement is, issuing consequences to these individuals. And even in the extreme case of Cowboy Judge, that was, basically showing up to events outside of competitive play and making inappropriate comments towards women and trans individuals. Yeah, Pokemon went, this person's banned from being a professor. Problem solved. That doesn't solve the problem. The problem was allowing that individual to become a judge at a regional level for a regional championship without noticing these types of personality factors, these types of behaviors, because that essentially is an example of one of these Dorito fingered turds that I mentioned earlier transcending their way up the ladder into being in a position of pseudo power, within organized play. The last component I wanted to talk about today was how Pokemon organized play interacts with your local game shops, which is barely. I recently began working for an LGS. I'll talk more about that in a separate video, but one of the things I learned very quickly in learning how to run these smaller LGS events is that Pokemon does not provide very much support. And it goes beyond just not awarding points for locals, for not bringing back city championships, for not offering prize support for individuals actually coming out to sit across from them, from one another at a table and playing paper Pokemon. They don't have much of an incentive, but it actually goes beyond that, in that the system for tracking and recording events is also, as you would expect, garbage, because the very most minimal effort has gone into this system to report to Pokemon how many players showed up, results, all of this tournament stuff. It's just not a good system. Of all of the TCGs that my particular LGS offers, Pokemon is by far the worst system to report data to. And when it does come to, the point system, yeah, we kind of understand that with COVID going on, COVID's still not over. It's going to be here forever, probably. In-person play, basically making a comeback. People are more comfortable with actually playing in person again. I mean, when you look at just the regional events from 2022 up until present, they're some of the biggest in-person events ever for Pokemon, which shows that people do want to show up and play Pokemon. With that, they should know that, people want to play locally. It's not just, driving to the nearest big city you can to play at this very high competitive level. People like showing up just to play casually, just to meet the local players kind of in the network. And, I've got friends, all the way back from Team Pony that say they basically dropped playing locally because there wasn't incentive to. It was fun, they got to test decks, they got to meet new people, but they weren't accruing any points locally. And without that, people have jobs. People have other stuff going on in their life. We can't, all get stipends to be flown around the world and play at these big events. People that want to work their way up and earn their way into invitations, don't really have an avenue for that right now. And there's no reason that Pokemon can't do it because they were doing it before. It's just minimal effort. Just like everything else that we've been talking about. And the issue expands beyond the TCG, beyond organized play. It is a corporation wide, a property wide issue. The same type of issue that people have been complaining about the Scarlet and Violet games. Those games are absolutely half-assed. They don't run the way they're supposed to. There's tons of problems. And those problems still haven't been completely fixed. I mean, there's been patches, but the game is still not a quality game for one of the biggest media franchises in the world. Scarlet and Violet are still two of the best-selling Pokemon games. The money's there. It's just allocating resources to fix these issues. And it's the same with the TCG. But one of the feelings I get is that the Pokemon Company is caring less and less about the competitive side of the TCG. I mean, they are definitely designing and pumping out quality competitive cards, but it's basically a couple percent. Brilliant Stars was very geared towards, here's a really good Arceus. We already know that Arceus is the new best deck. You know, and then when it came around to, let's bring back the Lost Zone. And Lost Zone is just going to be the next best deck in format. And it was the same with Palkia V-Star. It was the same, when Lugia V-Star dropped. Each set is just a vehicle to push whatever the next deck is. You can build Rogue, you can tinker around with stuff and have fun with the game still, but the support's just not there. Not for LGSs, not for players, not for organized events. And the same type of problem with Scarlet and Violet was, yes, that game was not ready to come out. Because if they delayed that game, they also have to delay the TCG that have the new Pokemon in it. They have to delay the production on all of the new plushies and pins and sets that are coming out. You have to delay all of your merch. There's so many moving parts within the Pokemon Company that if you pull out one of those gears, the entire machine has to stop running. And Pokemon, as a card game, is caught up in that same machine. All of these tiny gears trying to move. The TCG is just one component of it. And the problem isn't as easy as I have probably made it sound so far, which is, hey, provide more quality control for the individuals within your organization, for the leadership within your organization, and how those interact with the card game itself, so that people can actually play online if they want to. That is a problem that I think you can literally throw money at. Get some people that know what they're doing with developing that app and put them to work. Get a giant team that can work together on this app and actually get it fixed so that people can play it. This app that you're forcing people to migrate over to, it's the trickle down of these big problems within Pokemon to each little facet that we interact with. And I'm sure there's a lot more problems out there that I'm aware with sides of the fandom that I don't interact with. But right now, the biggest one, the one with the most glaring problems to me, is within the player base. People that want to play the card game, whether online or in person, just aren't getting the experience that they deserve. The Dragon Ball Super online card game app runs way smoother and looks way better than Pokemon Live right now. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has great online support. Yu-Gi-Oh! Has great in-person support. Magic the Gathering Arena is an amazing online client. Magic players get so much in-person support across so many different styles of play and formats. Meanwhile, Pokemon just goes, yep, we've got standard play. That's all we do. and we're not doing a great job at that one thing. So forget any other style of play getting support. If you want to do GLC, you know, get your LGS to set it up for you, but we're not going to give you shit. I know there's not any simple solution. It's not as easy as me sitting here and saying, you know, slow things down a bit and allocate resources where they're needed to make sure everything you currently have is fixed and operating before you move on to more things. That's not the way the Pokemon Company operates. I'm sure they're already developing the next, 3 games at least within their video game franchise. The TCG is way ahead in designing cards and developing what each new metagame is going to be based off of these new sets. But I do think that these problems are worth bringing up so that they can be addressed at each rung of the ladder. You know, if you're starting at the bottom and going, okay, can we at least get some more LGS support so we can get people playing locally? Then move your way up. You know, can we get city championships back? Can we start regulating the types of people that we're allowing to get professorship and judge events? You know, you kind of tackle one thing at a time, but no one's going to be able to address these unless people are vocalizing what the issues are and seeking solutions from the people that handle those types of things at each event, at each level. So I've rambled enough. This is just something that I really wanted to address on the channel. I wanted to get some input from you guys that are probably a lot more active in-person play and online play than I am right now, because I'm still waiting on a client that will work. So feel free to share your experiences down in the comments, good and bad. You know, the parts of Pokemon that you feel are working really well, I like to hear about those just as much as any problems that pop up. And let me know, your ideas for any solutions, because there's a lot of toxicity that I see in these discussions online. And there's some good input in there too. It's just really getting these messages to the people that need to hear them. The channel will be back to some more vintage TCG content soon. I've been battling with these Bradford pear trees lately. Thanks for watching all the way to the end of the video. I look forward to reading what you guys have to say down in the comments, and I'll see you next video. Bye.